Welcome to the joint snapping system version 1.30.5. This is for Blender versions 3.3 to 5.2. In this update, I wanted to talk a little bit about the new features we've added, which are tags. You can now tag specific joints to the joint snapping objects and save those tags when you save the object as a prefab. And I'll explain a little bit about why that's useful and how powerful that is. Uh, First, I wanted to go over a couple features that we added. We've improved performance um, across all Blender versions. There was a couple snags in the end panel that were causing the uh, performance to drag a little bit. So that's been resolved, and I'm very happy about that. The placement of objects is now really smooth. Um, and there's also another feature that we added in the developers tool section. There's now the open startup directory button. Open startup directory will take you directly to the startup directory in the file browser. And this was very useful not only as a developer, but as a user. If you wanted to delete lists manually, you can do that by opening up your startup directory and just deleting the lists in there. Um, Another feature we added was updates to the precision snapping mode. Precision snapping mode now accepts a couple different criteria. For example, when you're snapping to an object and you hold shift, it already recognizes that snap, so that when you snap to a different snapping point, it's going to just draw a line to the new snapping point and snap directly to those snapping points. I hope that makes sense. So it knows if it's snapped already. You can still uh, initiate the snap, and then you can do subsequent snaps after that. And it draws the line between each subsequent snap. Also, the incremental force snap mode, while in precision snapping mode, has been improved. Before it would only work for the first snap, but now even if you incrementally snap to other snapping surfaces, you can press R and it'll rotate in that incremental force snap mode. And this just works very smoothly. I'm very happy with that. So let's talk about tags. Tags are a big feature. And what exactly do tags do for you? Well, here's some examples uh, that I've prepared. So let me place these objects in the scene. These are prefab objects. So here we have 4 prefab objects that I've prepared, and um, they have tags on them. And you can see these tags by going into prefab edit mode, or sorry, edit snapping points mode. So if I press Shift+J and I go into edit snapping points mode, you can see the snapping points like before, but now they have tags on them. You can see the little words, they say torch. So, um, and each of these objects have a torch snapping point. whether that's a legacy snapping point or a new universal joint snapping point. You can tag any um, snapping point, universal, legacy, or otherwise. So what does this do for you? Well, you can create a object like a torch, for example, and label that as a socket. So these are labeled as, these are labeled as sockets, and these are labeled as attachments. And I'll go into that a little more in a bit. But the main functionality here is that you can Shift+J and you can do populate tag joints. And then I'll bring up a list. It gives you some options here. I'm not going to go over all of these options, but there's alignment options, full alignment, position only, and there's a seed and a density, and you can also change it to random. If you have multiple torches, for example, multiple objects that have snapping points that are labeled as torches, it'll randomize between those. So let's just see what it does. I'm going to click populate. And as you can see, it's added snapping points to all the snapping points. Sorry, it added snapping objects to all the snapping points that are labeled as torch from the list. So this is a huge automation workflow improvement. For example, what if you build a dungeon or a laboratory or whatever, and you're labeling these snapping points as you go along and as you're saving objects. So you can build a castle or something like that, and then select the castle pieces, in this case a pillar, and select populate from the Shift+J menu. You select populate tag joints, and it's just going to fill all those snapping points exactly as you designed it with objects. Uh, and they use the rotation of the snapping points, and for example, this one here, you can see it rotated at it's automatically rotated at a 45-degree angle, and these are automatically rotated to fit the sides of the face. So this is a huge automated workflow improvement. I hope you find that interesting. Um, hope you find that impressive. And there's another use case for this new feature. For example, what if you have a spaceship? This is my simple spaceship hole. You can populate this as well, and you can populate it. Now, the main biggest different feature here that I want to talk about is Cascade Depth. Cascade Depth is really important because now we're talking about prefab objects that uh, I'll just show you what I mean. I'll click populate, and this has a cascade depth of 1. So it only populated a depth of 1. Now I'll undo that, and I'll do it again. Whoops. Populate tag joints, and I'll do a cascade depth of 2. And as you can see, it added the wings, and it added these guns in addition to the wings. So the wings have a socket and a attachment. So I'll show you that right now. If I go into Shift+J, edit snapping points, you can see up here there's a wing socket or a wing attachment. Down here there's a gun socket that accepts a gun. So that's a really cool workflow. I'll press escape to get out of that. So cascading, uh, populating through Cascade is really efficient. Imagine you start with a spaceship hull, any mesh design. Obviously this mesh is very simple, but you can have a much more intricate uh, design. And all you have to do is Shift+J, populate tag joints, and now I've actually set it up for a cascade depth of 3. If I hit populate, now you can see there's 3 levels of cascade depth, which is really cool. We have the hull, we have the wing, we have the gun, and we have the muzzle. And that did it on both sides, which is awesome. So it's almost a symmetrical workflow as long as you set up the orientation of the joints correctly. I'll show you how I set up the orientation of the joints. If I undo all this, there we go. And if I go Shift+J, edit snapping points, you can see that the Z-axis is out on both sides, and the Y-axis is forward on both sides. So that was important to get the wings oriented correctly when they spawn. So that's really cool. In the future, you can have a list of spaceship parts, and all you have to do is start with a hole, and all you have to do is make the individual parts, like the gun and the muzzle, and you can still attach these manually. But yeah, it's really cool. Uh, and I wanted to show you another feature that I feel is really powerful for this. It's if you look in the Shift+J menu, there's also Randomize Selected. So Randomize Selected, if you have multiple parts that are similar, it'll randomize those parts. So I went and created another spaceship wing. This is what it looks like. It's pretty much exactly the same as the first wing, except it has this inset, just to test the workflow. And I'll select these 2 pieces. I'll hit Shift+J and I'll do Randomize Selected. And you can choose a Cascade Depth as well. This can go all the way to 10, it doesn't matter. It'll stop at the maximum Cascade Depth. And you can choose Rebuild Children. You can choose the seed and click Randomize. As you can see, it replaced the wings with that new version. And there's a seed. So if you do randomize, and if you open up the last used operation box, and if you change that seed, you'll notice that it randomizes the placement. So you can get something like that. So imagine you have a spaceship hull, you populate all these pieces from it, and then you can randomize all the pieces from it. So you can have random spaceships generated, basically a random spaceship generator. And this would work for anything, not just spaceships. If you have castle pieces, or if you have a dungeon, right, a dungeon interior, we can randomize the dungeon interior. And this also works for the hull itself. You can do Shift+J on the hull and do Randomize Selected. and you can randomize the whole. And that's pretty powerful. I'm very excited for this feature. Um, so let me show you the workflow on how to set up these snapping points. So just like edit snapping points from the Shift+J menu, uh, this has been optimized to work at any step of the joint creation process. So I can just create a prefab. I can select, this is 5.2, so I have to select the edge. And I'll select this face, and I'll do Shift+J, fast jointify from selection. So I've created a new universal joint here, and I can immediately go into Shift+J and do Manage Joint Tags. So Manage Joint Tags will open up this new dialog box where you can just type the tag in. So I can call this torch, and the semantic type will be socket. You can choose from either socket or attachment. Basically, socket is kind of the host, and the attachment is kind of the guest. So I'll leave it as socket because I want a torch to attach to this object. So I'll click Save, and you can see the little word there appears uh, above the universal snapping point. It says torch, so you know that's tagged correctly. And I'll press Enter. So now this is a working prefab object. I'm going to save this to my tags list, or my test list. I'm going to save that. Now here's the object that I just saved. Now I've created a couple torches already. These are the two torches I made. They're very simple, but hope you can appreciate that this will work with any mesh. So all you have to do, since it's because it's part of the same list, those torches are automatically going to work. If I put Shift+J, populate tag joints, and at the top here, you can see the drop down says it says same list. So you can use same list. You can choose a specific list, or you could choose all lists. In this case, I'm just going to use same list. And the cascade depth doesn't matter. There's only one depth. So I'm going to hit populate. There you can see it added the torch because we set up the socket. And adding the uh, the tag to the torch itself is the same workflow. You just go manage joint tags, and you change the semantic type to attachment instead of socket. So yeah, this is really cool. Uh, one more thing I'll show before I close the video is I'll randomize the torches for you, just so you can show, just so I can show that I can randomize the torches. So if I go into candidate mode here, you can choose random, and you can choose the seed, whatever. The seed will change the kind of random layout. And you can also choose the orientation. I'll go over that in a second. So populate, and as you can see, it added random torches. So if you have two torch types, it's going to randomize between those two torch types. If you have 10 different torches, it's going to randomize between all those torch types and snap directly to the snapping points that you created. So this is hugely powerful, and it's I hope you can appreciate it. It's really cool. And you can select these. Shift+J, if you're not happy with this, with the randomization, you can use Randomize Selected. Rebuild children doesn't matter. You do randomize, and it randomizes them again. And down here in the last used operation box, you can change the seed. And you can see how they all randomize. And the performance doesn't change, even though the Cascade Depth was set to 10. So, yeah, this is really cool. The last thing I'll go over is the orientation. This was set up for torches specifically, but I'm sure there's other use cases. For example, let's say you have objects that have rotated uh, sides and things like that. I'll rotate these 90 degrees. So these are all rotated at 90 degrees. So now let's see what happens. If I populate tag joints and the orientation is set to default or full alignment. So what I expect to happen is them to orient themselves with the rotation of the object. Let's see if that happens. And yes, that's what happened. The torches, even though you rotated the object, they're orientated with the snapping points. Except for maybe these cases. So maybe legacy snapping points are not utilizing the orientation. So legacy snapping points are a little bit different. They act without orientation in mind. So let's try this again. Let's do populate tag joints. And let's change the orientation to upright and populate. So now you can see the result has changed. Now they're trying to face upright, which is really interesting. And you can also set it to position only for orientation. Wow, that's pretty cool. So position only kind of guarantees that they're directly upwards, no matter what rotation the original object is at. So I guess that's how the legacy snapping points are working. Uh, so legacy snapping points are working kind of as position only snapping points. So that's all the new features in this update. I hope you like this video. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And please give the add-on a try. It's on superhivemarket.com. Just search for the joint snapping system. And yeah, thanks for watching.